My dear learners, welcome to this course, Development Economics 2. In this course, we are now discussing the section on demography and development, and today we are going to discuss the module 2. Now, before going to the main topics of module 2, I would like to focus on the first starting slide. The bottom left corner is representing a few highly populated countries in the world like India, China, and many other countries. The bottom right GIF is also representing the issue overpopulation. And the top right corner of this slide is representing the case of negative population growth or very low population growth. So at the same time, high population growth is also happening, and with that, negative population growth is also happening in many other countries. So with this complex and nuanced picture, we are going to start this module 2. Now, what we learn in this lecture? What we learn in this lecture are the following things, and three main things we are going to learn in this lecture. We are going to do a quick recap of module 1, what we have already done. And now, three main topics are, for this module, age structure, then dependency ratio, and then median age. And with all these, we are going to learn the global picture as well as country-specific issues. Now, let me jump into the next issue. And before going to the main topics, first of all, let us discuss the let us take a quick recap of the module 1, what we have learned in the module 1. So in the module 1, we have introduced the issue of development. We have discussed definitions of development. We have talked about Professor Amartya Sen's definition of development and other definitions of development. Also, we talked about the features of underdevelopment. What do we mean by underdevelopment, right? So we have talked about around 10 features of underdevelopment. We have given examples of underdevelopment. And then we tried to connect the issue of development with demography. What are the connections between demography and development? And then we discussed some main definitions on demography, such as birth rate, death rate, total fertility rate, etc. We have talked about different country experiences and the global picture. Also, other than these, we have talked about the global history of population growth. Over time, what happened to population growth all over the world. And other than that, most importantly, we have talked about the present scenario regarding population growth using the latest data published by UN. And with that data, with the UN report, we also have talked about the future projections about population and population growth. So what may happen and what can happen and what are the projections regarding population growth. So let us move on. And while moving on, we are taking a question here. The first question of this lecture. So as we moving on in the deeper concepts of demography, let us ask a question. The first question is, what do we mean by age structure? How did age structure change over time? We are starting with the question, how did age structure change over time all over the world? So far in the module 1, we have discussed the history of population growth all over the world, and we have talked about country-specific experiences also. Now, the absolute figures, the absolute data about population cannot tell us much unless we know the age structure, right? So that's how the situation of or the concept of age structure is so much important. The age structure of a population has important impacts for various aspects of society, such as economic growth rate, labor force participation rate, health and education sector, need for pension and infrastructure development. For all these, understanding the issue of age structure and how the age structure is changing all over the world and in different countries, that's how and that is why this issue is so much important. Now, over the past century, the age structure of populations has been changing dramatically. So a significant global transformation has happened regarding age structure over the past centuries. And we are going to discuss that global transformation in this lecture, as well as we are going to take up a few country examples also, country specific trajectories also we are going to learn. So moving on to the next slide. Now this particular GIF is portraying the change of age structure over time. And we are going to discuss this in detail, but let us just focus on one key idea or one main point here. The main point is that over time, the highest proportion of age group that is dominating the world population, the highest share of the population is coming from, it has changed, and now it is coming from the relatively higher age groups. So over time, highest proportion of population in the world has changed and it has moved toward the higher age groups. So this is the key concept and this is the key instrument we are going to use while talking about age structure all over the world. As I have already said that first of all we are going to talk about the global transformation of age structure, and then we are going to talk about the country specific issues. So while talking about global transformation of age structure, one very important instrument is the instrument of population pyramid. Now let us focus on this population pyramid. First of all, I am going to spend some time on this instrument since it is very, very important for our purpose. Now first of all, just note two important points. Point number one, that is the color of the pyramid is changing. It is changing from deep blue towards green, right? So around 1950, so data here has been captured for the period of 1950 to 2018. And then we are talking about also projections, future projections also has been tried to capture here. Now what do we mean by this? So the 2 points, the color of the pyramid is changing from deep blue towards green, and the pyramid is expanding over time. Now what do we mean by these two key points? The explanation is the following. Initially around 1950s or so, the mortality rate was very high in all over the world. So that is why number of people that were being added in the higher age groups, that number was relatively fewer, right? So let me explain once again, as the mortality rate was very high, so people were not living that much. So they were dying sooner. So the addition in the higher age groups were relatively lesser and lesser in number at the time of 1950 or so. But over time, few things have changed. What has changed? Number one, mortality rate has fallen. All over the world, the mortality rate has fallen. Number two, birth rate and total fertility rate has also fallen. Number three, health-wise and education-wise attainment have improved all over the world. As a result, more and more number of people have been added in the higher age groups. Hence, the pyramid has expanded. If we look carefully, we can see the middle portion has expanded significantly. And even in the top portion also, there also expansion is clearly visible. Now, in the population pyramid diagram, we have used the arrow. With the arrow, we have shown the color change and we have marked it also and to show the expansion of the pyramid, right? So summary of the population pyramid is the following. Number one, from narrow to expanded pyramid, we can observe over time, the pyramid has expanded over time. Point number two, mortality rate has fallen, total fertility rate has also fallen, and health facilities and educational attainment have improved. And number three, due to lowering TFR, as the TFR or total fertility rate has fallen. So expansion is happening, or expansion in the pyramid has happened over time in the middle range, not in the base range, or not to the bottom. So pyramid has not expanded much in the bottom area because the fertility rate has fallen, right? So what is happening now, or what has happened over time, is a filling up in the higher age groups, right? So now let me talk about turning point. So once we have introduced the notion of population pyramid, and as we have pointed out key features and dynamics regarding the population, let me talk about the turning point. We are at a turning point in global population history now. Between 1950 and today, it was a widening of the entire pyramid, an increase in the number of children that was responsible for the increase of the world population. But from now on, it is not a widening of the base, rather a fill up of the population above the base. We are actually discussing this point. The number of children will barely increase and then start to decline. But the number of people of working age and old age will increase very substantially over time. As global health is improving and mortality is falling, the people alive today are expected to live longer than any generation before us. So this is the key idea here, that the base of the pyramid is not going to expand much. Rather, due to the 3 points, 1, falling mortality, number 2, due to falling TFR or falling for fertility rates, and number 3, due to expansive improvement in healthcare and education and other related things, what is going to happen is that here a filling up effect will happen that will create an expansion on the pyramid in the medium level. In the mid level of the pyramid, there will be expansion, and even in the higher level of the pyramid, in the higher areas in the pyramid, population pyramid, there will be expansion, and base is not going to expand much because the birth rate or fertility rate has fallen drastically all over the world. Moving on. Now, so far we have discussed the story of global transformation in terms of age structure. And the key point we said is that the age structure wise globally, now the highest share is captured over time by the older population. Relatively older population, they have actually captured the highest share of population, right? So after discussing this global transformation story, now we are going to talk about country-specific experiences. Now let us first take the case of Japan. What is happening to Japan? Now, Japan's experience is very interesting. Here, in terms of age structure, we have shown with the arrow as well. The red arrow is showing the top blue patch in this diagram, which is representing the 65 plus years of population. The population is divided into different age groups, and the elderly population is represented by 65 plus age group, right? So in Japan, we can observe that the point is that in Japan, this number of people in the age group 65 plus is very high compared to other countries in the world. Moving on to another country, that is India. We are taking the case of India. So in a similar way, if we focus in this diagram, and the arrow is also saying the same thing, that is the top blue patch in this diagram is showing the number of people in the age group 65 plus. Here clearly we can see this number in India and this proportion in India is lower than Japan, right? Moving on to another country, taking the example of China. In the same way, the arrow is also showing that the top blue patch in this diagram is actually showing the number of people in the elderly age group, that is the age group of 65 plus. So there we can observe that in China this number and this proportion is definitely lower than Japan, but this might be higher than India. So as we have discussed the first key concept, age structure, and we have talked about the global transformation of age structure, we have discussed the global transformation and country specific experiences in terms of age structure and change in age structure, right? So the next or the second question in a connecting way that will connect us to the next portion, which is on dependency ratio. What is dependency ratio? That is the question. So the second topic in this lecture, in this module 2, is dependency ratio. So the first topic was age structure and evolution of age structure globally as well as the country specific experiences we have discussed. Now we are going to discuss the concept of dependency ratio. This is a very, very important concept. What do we mean by dependency ratio? See, in the demography, usually any population can be divided into 3 groups, right? So group 1 represents children and young adolescents, people in the less than 15 age group. So group 1 is population under 15 age group, and group 2 is the working age population, that is people in the 15 to 64 that age group, and group 3 is about the elderly population, people in the age group 65 plus. Now we are going to discuss the equation of dependency ratio. Now dependency ratio can be represented in an equation format in this way. Dependency ratio is equal to group 1 plus group 3 divided by group 2. So it implies that we are taking the children and young adolescents in the group 1 plus the elderly population in the group 3. These two we are taking together, the sum of this population in these two groups in the numerator, and in the denominator we are taking the number of people in the working age group. That is giving us the dependency ratio. So one way to put it is dependent population divided by the working age group. So who are the dependent population? Children and young adolescents plus the elderly people, right? So a large fraction of economical dependence relative to those in the working age bracket can have negative impacts for labor productivity, capital formation and savings rates. So if the dependency ratio is very high, if there are large number of economically dependents, that can have impacts over labor force participation, infrastructure development, health, education and other things like pension plans, etc., right? So it can have negative impact on overall economic development. Now dependency ratio can be of 100%, that means the same number of dependents with the same number of working age population. If the number of people in the working age population is equal to the number of people in the dependent group, right? So that will give us 100% dependency ratio. If it is more than 100%, it means the number of people in the dependent group is relatively higher than the working age population. And if it is lower than 100%, it typically means that number of people in the dependent age group, in the dependent population groups, is typically lower than number of people in the working age group. And main point is that if the number of people in the working age group is higher, that is beneficial for a country's that can be beneficial for a country's economic development. Typically, we can observe that dependency ratio stays around 50 to 60% in most of the countries. But in countries of Sub-Saharan Africa, countries like Nigeria, Niger, Mali, in such countries, dependency ratio is very high. Moving on, youth and old age dependency. Here, the point is that so far we have discussed the total dependency ratio, where we have taken in the numerator the children, this group, the group representing the people under the 15 age group and the people in the elderly age group, that is people in the 65 plus group, right? These two we have taken together in the numerator, and in the denominator we have taken the working age population. Now we can break it down to two parts, right? One will give us the youth dependency ratio, another will give us elderly dependency ratio, right? And here the key definition, while breaking it down, the key idea is to compare the old versus youth requirements, right? So now if we take in the numerator only the older people, elderly people, people in the age group representing people more than 65 plus age, right? If that we can take in the numerator, and in the denominator if we take the number of people in the working age group, that gives us the dependency ratio of older people, right? So this way we can divide youth and old age dependency ratio. Now let us take some country experiences. For Japan, once again, Japan is very important in this regard, because here the old dependency ratio is very much prevalent in Japan. Old dependency ratio, number of older people, number of elderly people is very high. So old dependency ratio is very serious for Japan. Now if we take the case of Nigeria, here the picture is completely opposite. Here the number of elderly people is not very high and youth dependency ratio is serious. Again, for India, we can observe that number of old people or elderly people is not so high and youth dependency ratio is dominating. And for China also, quite similar to India, the number of elderly people is still not very high. It is going to be far more. It is moving in the upward direction, but still the youth dependency ratio is dominant in China. Now, what are the summary findings? Japan has a much older population in 2021. So there are too many people in the age groups 65 plus, and even more than twice as many above 64 as there were children younger than 15. So in Japan, specifically in Japan, the old age dependency ratio is very serious, which is representing the people in the 65 plus age group in comparison to the group 1. The group 3 is representing number of people in the 65 plus age group. People in this age group in Japan is much more than in number compared to number of children. The opposite is true in Nigeria, and India and China is lying somewhere in between. And a key finding is that higher income countries with low fertility rates and longer life expectancies are dominated by an older population. The opposite is true for lower income countries with high fertility rates. Now let us take another question, that is, what is the implication of median age? What is the implication of median age? Next, we are going to talk about median age. Median age basically provides the age midpoint of a population. There are the same number of people who are older than the median age and the same number of people who are younger than the median age. The global median age is around 30. So it is dividing the global population. half of the global population is above 30, half of the global population is below 30. It is highest in Japan, which is around 50, and it is lowest in the country Niger, which is around 15. So this graph is basically, this diagram is showing the different countries' median age over time, and we can observe that Japan is representing the highest median age. India is quite lower than Japan, and India is performing little better in terms of median age, and it is quite closer to the global average or so. Now, continuing with the idea median age, why it is important? Because countries with lower median age tend to have higher population growth rates. Lower income countries tend to have a lower median age. This is because they have a younger population overall. High fertility rates across these countries mean they have larger populations of young children and adolescents. So lower income countries used to have a lower median age. Now let me represent an interesting relationship between median age and births per woman. This graph is representing that relationship for different countries, and here we can observe that Japan is representing very high median age and very low number in terms of births per woman. And some of the African countries, Nigeria, Mali, Niger, they are representing very low median age and high number of births per woman, right? High birth rate. So there is a sort of negative relationship between median age and births per woman, number of births per woman. Now, the summary findings regarding median age. Overall, we see that higher income countries in North America, Europe, or in Asia, they are showing a tendency to have a higher median age. So higher income countries are showing the tendency to have a higher median age, and countries with lower median age tend to have higher population growth rates. So lower income countries tend to have a lower median age because they have a younger population overall, and due to high fertility rates, that may be the reason. Now, what are the take-home points? Now we have come to the end of this lecture, Module 2. We are concluding Module 2 by revising the take-home points from this lecture. So first of all, we have discussed age structure, the main concept age structure. We have talked about global transformation and country issues. Also, we have talked about the two more concepts, dependency ratio and median age. Thank you.